Well, welcome. I'm John Sarber, your host tonight. I'm a board member for Great Lakes Renewable Energy Association, and we're happy to host and sponsor these Zooms on Thursday evenings. And I need to kind of thank our sponsors, the State Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy, EGLE, Homeland Solar, Harvest Solar, and who did I forget? Oh, Sri Energy. And I'd like to thank all of you who are members of GLREA for joining the organization. And if you're not a member, we would love to have you join the family. It's easy to do. Just go to our website, glrea.org, glrea.org, and you'll see it's very prominent where you can kind of press some buttons and just sign up online. Membership support is really important to us for both our advocacy and educational efforts. And so we those of you who are already members, thank you. And those who will become members, thank you. And tonight, Charles Gould, who's with MSU Extension, is going to be talking to us about agrivoltaics. Charles has been involved with energy for a long time. He's been involved with MSU Extension for, I guess, 30 years, and has his expertise in kind of bioenergy, solar energy, energy conservation. Been doing a lot of good work with farmers and with the agricultural community to kind of help them take advantage of the new technologies and become more efficient and save some money too. And so with that, let me pass the torch on to Charles for his presentation. After his presentation, I think we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. Go ahead, Charles.
Thank you, John. Okay. Are you seeing the full slide?
Looking good.
Okay. So let me do one other thing here. Let me get the floating meeting annotations off my screen here, and then I think we're ready to go. Well, it's a delight to be here tonight. I hope that we have a lively discussion. I think I've got about 25 minutes worth of slides that I want to share with you. And then I'd like to have some discussion on what I've proposed. I realized a little bit too late that, man, perhaps I was a little I guess a little braggadocious, I guess, or a little maybe cavalier in the topic that I chose here. And I've reworded it because I wanted to really emphasize the fact that agrivoltaics is not the key to solar project community solar projects. It's the key to community supported solar projects. And I think there's a big difference there because if a community supports a solar project, regardless of scale, that should be a positive thing. So I just wanted to call your attention to some of the photos on this first slide here. The one on the bottom left is actually a hayfield. And you'll see that the solar panels are elevated above the soil surface there so that farm equipment can move back and forth without being impeded. The picture on the bottom right is from Jack's Solar Garden in Colorado. And Jack's grows all kinds of vegetables, and we'll show you more of those pictures later on. And then the top one is a solar project that's grazing sheep. So we're going to hit all of those topics and a few more as we go along. So I want to start from the point of for a successful agrivoltaic project in a solar project, you need to have a cropping system and a grazing system that works, that's legitimate. So what do I mean by a cropping system? So what I'm talking about is we look at the crop that's planted, and we look at how it grows and how it's managed, and then you figure crop rotations, and you look at the soil, and it's that whole systems approach that you take a look at that helps you make the determination of what kind of crop grows in a solar system year after year. And this is really no different than what a farmer would go through. They're making those determinations a year, 2 years down the road in many cases. The only difference that you have is that you've got solar arrays there that you have to work with, where a normal farmer would not have that. A livestock system looks at the production practices that utilize animal, plant, soil characteristics within an environmental framework. So the end goal is to grow crops and livestock that are marketable, but to do it in a way that takes all these factors into consideration. And so I mentioned that we wanted to have legitimate cropping systems and livestock systems. We have a term when we talk about pollinator habitat where folks come in and they say, "Oh, there's a pollinator habitat there." Well, it turns out to be mostly grasses and very few wildflowers, and we call that bee washing. And so I wanted to define cropping systems and livestock systems so that you knew what it was. And so we were all on the same page that these are the type of systems that have to go in a solar project. They can't be, they can't go part of the way or, be something other than those types of systems. And so you ask yourself why? Well, these systems are crucial for food security. And that's been one of the criticisms for solar projects. And I've often thought to myself, well, if we're going to put solar on cropland, why wouldn't we want to continue to farm it? We can figure those things out. We know how to plant and harvest, do all the things that we need to do. We just need to adapt them to a solar system. And then, of course, there's the environmental sustainability aspect here. We're going to keep the soil productive. We're building carbon. We're doing things that improve soil health, those kinds of things. And of course, there's the economic viability. Farmers have to make money. And it's no different than a manufacturing company. If they don't make money, they don't stay in business. So all three of them work together when we have legitimate cropping systems and livestock systems in solar projects. And then, of course, of necessity, these systems have to interact with farm resources, the resources that are there: tractors, sprayers, planting equipment, those kinds of things, other farm enterprises, whatever that might be, and then available technology. And, every year I'm amazed at the technology that comes out in agriculture. Our farmers are not, they're not dummies. They take advantage of the technology because in many instances, it helps bring income into the farm or it reduces costs. So here's some factors. If we let's keep the cropping system and the grazing system in mind in the perspective of these 2 points that are 3 points that I'm going to show you here. By 2035, 50% of the world's electricity production is going to come from solar. All right, so if we know that's coming and we know that we still need to produce food, then let's bring those systems together and let's, figure out how to make that happen. And there's a tremendous amount of that work going on all around the world, including now here in the United States. I thought this study was really interesting, and I wanted to share it with you because this gets at the resistance to solar projects and helps to help us understand people's views. So people who live 3 miles or less from an agrivoltaic site are 7 times more likely to support solar. Why is that? Well, because they can see crops growing or they can see livestock out there grazing. And so that land is being utilized for, its intended purpose. So here's the thing that I want to say to you is instead of leading with how many kilowatts we're going to produce, let's lead with agriculture. Let's lead with a cropping system, or let's lead with a grazing system. And then let's bring the solar in around it so that we maximize the land for cropping and livestock and for power production. So how is this done? Now, I recognize that this slide it doesn't include everything because there are other things. So, there's policy issues that need to be addressed, and I recognize that. But typically, a solar developer is at the tip of the spear. They're the ones that are coming into a community, and they are the ones that are putting a plan out there. So some things to consider on changing public perception and getting support for solar projects would be for a company-wide paradigm shift. And the screenshot on the right here is with Hyperion Systems. They're a solar developer out of Massachusetts. And when you go to their website, this is the first thing that you see. Now, I just think to yourself for a minute, how do you feel when you see the words where farming and solar work together? Okay, would you want to do business with a solar company who leads off with where farming and solar work together? And Hyperion Systems is not the only one that is really doing that kind of work. There are legitimate solar companies out there that are working with farmers to integrate cropping or grazing systems in their solar project. Another thing that would go a long way is for a solar developer to hire an agronomist. I think that's one of the things that really separates solar companies today who really want to address this agrivoltaic issue in a legitimate way, is they have an agronomist on staff. They have someone who can work with a farmer who speaks their language, who can help them develop a cropping system based on local markets, based on soil types, those kinds of things. Get to know the farming community and agricultural commodity groups. I think here in Michigan, one of the companies that I've seen that's probably the most visible is Harvest Solar out of Jackson. Harvest has relationships with agricultural commodity groups, and a lot of their systems are on farms. When I go around and talk with farmers, I I'll bring that up, and typically it's a harvest solar. Now that's not to be construed as a endorsement. It's just an observation. Lee, got a question?
I went to a farm meeting earlier this month and had lunch with a guy who was an agronomist. His comment about solar was, I've lost 5,000 acres of customers
Yep.
because of solar. And so, Charles, I'd encourage you to not just say to the solar people, you need an agronomist. We should say to the agronomists in the world that you need to find a solar company because they need you.
Yeah. Good point. Good point. I've heard that same comment has been mentioned to me, and that's a point well taken. Thanks, Lee. And then I would say that the fourth point here is to work with universities to answer agrivoltaic questions, because there's still questions out there that need to be answered, but we know enough to get started. There's no reason why we can't move in that direction. We know enough to get systems started and have success. Okay, so let's do a little deeper dive in here. Excuse me. And I want to start with the grazing aspect here. So I think this is a video here. Let's see if it will. There we go.
And Tom, is it good to just get down the road? Especially since they're out here.
Okay, was everybody able to hear that? Lee, give me a thumbs up if you were able to hear that.
There was no sound.
It was very low.
Ah, okay. Well, the sound really didn't matter in this particular case, and it won't on the next video either, actually, because what I want you to note was what the video is going to talk about. So, did you notice that the sheep were able to very comfortably go underneath that lower lip of the solar panels? Okay, that's important, and that's pretty. What you're seeing there on the screen is the standard, pretty much within the industry. It fits it's the perfect size for a sheep. Okay. Another thing that you notice out there was a sheepdog. That's indispensable in the sheep industry, especially when they're grazing solar sites like this. So I was down in Georgia last summer taking a course to become a certified solar grazer. And this is White Acre Pastures down in southern Georgia. And they're grazing, I don't know, a couple thousand acres or so down there, and have had great success. So they were moving a flock of sheep from one paddock to another paddock. All right, so one of the things that I always hear is, well, you can't graze beef cattle. Well, actually you can. And I'm the cattle on the left side belong to Knowlton Farm. They're a Massachusetts farm, and they're grazing on Grafton Solar, a Grafton Solar project. And I'm having a webinar with Mr. Knowlton and some others late in February, and he'll talk about the system that you see there on your screen. So the cattle have a place where they're given supplemental grain. That's what you see on the left side. And then on the right side is still their system, but part of that solar project is in vegetable production, and this is in between crops right at this point. So there's nothing growing because it's either been planted or it was just harvested until then. I don't remember right off the bat. But cattle can and are being grazed in solar projects. So let's leave the grazing and let's talk about cropping systems. So the picture on the left is broccoli, and it's another Massachusetts farm that I went and visited. And you can see that the shade is over part of the broccoli crop, but it didn't have an effect on it in terms of its nutrition quality and in terms of its marketability. The farmer was able to sell it just like he would anything else. So the list that you see on your screen of crops that can be grown is not all inclusive. I just ran out of space, but I think it gives you a pretty good idea of the variety of crops that can be grown here in Michigan. And that's the same farm, it's just a broader shot. Here's something that I get really excited about, and I think this has real applications for Michigan. These are called vertical bifacial, and they don't move with the sun. They don't track, but they capture the east sun and the west sun. And so there's two peak outputs during the day, and they fit our climate because of the snow. There's no snow accumulation, and they still get the reflectant sunlight from the snow, and they do a nice job of producing electricity. So here's one of the things that you can do in between the vertical bifacial. This is alfalfa crop here that's being cut. These are dairy cattle that are where the vertical bifacial are being used as a fence. This is chickens, and I was going to replace this picture with a better picture. This is wheat that's being harvested. This is a full head on the combine, and it's going down between these vertical bifacial. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about the equipment, because if we're gonna harvest, this is gasoline powered. If we're gonna harvest and plant and do all the things that need to be done for a cropping system, we need to develop our electric tractors. So I had an opportunity this past summer to drive a 45 horsepower tractor, and you're looking at it right there. So it was a 30 horsepower travel motor and a 15 horsepower hydraulic motor, which was on the back. And this black box here is a battery, and you'll see that. This is the video that I'm going to show you here. But you'll see it as it goes down the row. What this does is this, let's see, let me shrink this just a little bit. It's an auxiliary battery that extends the time that you can stay in the field. So, there we go. So the battery in the tractor can last 3 hours in the field under heavy load and 6 hours under medium to light load. And what the battery does is it doubles that time. And then if you have a quick charger, you can take a battery from 30% to 80% charge in 2.5 hours. So it's possible to rotate batteries and be out in the field all day. That's one of the criticisms that I've heard from growers is, I don't want to have to wait. I need to get my work done. I'm running out of daylight, or I've got a storm coming in, or other kinds of things. So what the battery auxiliary battery allows them to do is stay in the field. So I'm going to put the next video on. This is the 45 horsepower tractor. I drove it. It's just like driving an EV car. You have instant torque when you let off the clutch. And this was not a toy. I mean, it does a man's work, so to speak. That we had hoped that we'd have a 55 horsepower and a 65 horsepower tractor, but at the time that this field demonstration was happening, it was on a ship from the Netherlands to the United States. That's where these tractors are made, and so we didn't have it available. So let's look at the video here. What I'm trying to show there is just, this is a tedder, and this is what he was going through. So my point here is we get solar on a farm. We charge the batteries with solar from the sun, with power from the sun, and we can do the work that needs to be done around the farm. Okay, so if we co-locate solar and agriculture, there's some significant benefits to doing that. And first one is water retention. So we maximize the efficiency of water used for plant irrigation by decreasing evaporation from soil and transpiration from crop canopies. Now, unfortunately, you can't see. There's really no depth perception here, I think. But when this is, I would say, about 6 feet when it's perpendicular to the ground, and then at the bottom lip, when it comes down, it's probably around 36 inches or so. So the nice thing about it is when you're wanting to harvest these tomatillos, and you've got your solar panels up, there's some shade right there. In terms of crops, you prevent depression in photosynthesis due to heat and light stress. So the crop does better. The crops actually in the heat of the day are under stress. And so what solar does is helps to alleviate that stress. Thus, the crop does better. And then for energy, the real cool thing is these crops that are grown underneath the solar panels lower the temperatures on the underside, which improves power production efficiency. All right, so this is my last slide here, but I wanted to make you aware of some opportunities here. If you scan the QR code on your screen, it's going to take you to the registration site for these two programs. They're part of what's called Michigan State University Extension, My Agricultural Ideas to Grow With. And these are online programs that we have been doing since COVID. And there's no cost for this, but when you register, you get a link that allows you to look at all of them. And I think this year we have, I don't know, about 30 presentations over about a 2-week period of time. And so if there's others presentations that you want to, participate in, you certainly can do that. But I wanted to bring your attention to these two programs. I'm going to be facilitating a discussion with Brooke Wilson, Paul Knowlton, and Angie Burke on Monday, February 24th from 7 till 8. What I've asked them to do is just give a short introduction about themselves and talk about their farm, and then in Angie's case, talk about Pivot's focus on agrivoltaics, and then really try to have a discussion, get audience participation in the discussion, so there's some really good education that takes place. So Brooke and her husband own Watson Farm, but they also own Illinois Solar Grazing. They've been grazing sheep for about a year. Paul Knowlton is the beef producer I was telling you about, and that's a family farm, has been there for generations, but they've been raising livestock, raising beef cattle, well, I don't know, last 3 years, 2 or 3 years, I guess. And then Angie Burke lives here in Michigan, graduated from the University of Michigan, and is the director of operations and maintenance for Pivot Energy. And Pivot is really doing some exciting things with agriculture, and I'll be excited to hear her talk a little bit about that. And then on February 26th, Gina Thurm and her husband are going to be talking about their operation, which they call Our Kids Farm. I believe they're from Delaware, if I'm not mistaken. And they own about 15 acres. They have greenhouses. They raise vegetables. They sell jams and honey, and they've got a community support garden, or community supported agriculture rather. Just do a lot of things in their operation, and they have a 0.15 acre solar array that generates electricity for their farm use, and they grow vegetables all around that solar array. And she was telling me that the reason that they put it in is because local government told her that they didn't want it. They didn't want any solar because it was going to take away from ag land. And I think part of her story that she's going to share with you is how she worked with her local government officials that eventually got her permitted to have that solar. She's got like 2 solar arrays, I think 2 or 3 solar arrays on her farm, and what success that she's had, both successes and some challenges that she's had with that. So this should be 2 excellent programs that speak to the topics we've been talking about today from people who have had several years of experience. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing here.
Yeah, if you have a question, raise a virtual hand, because we have 60 attendees tonight, and so we can't see everybody on a screen. So, there's a button on my computer, at least at the bottom, that says React, which you can click and then raise your virtual hand. But we're open for questions or comments. Anybody who'd like to be first? Kurt, go ahead.
Charles, when you talk to solar companies, what kind of opposition do they express? I don't think grazing is so much of an issue, but in terms of not row crops, but vegetable crops and or grain crops, when you talk to solar companies, why are they not all jumping on this bandwagon? What's their concern about this?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I think The solar companies really want to minimize the amount of people that are on their site. And I think the issue here is that the way it's being presented, that you would have a bunch of people there and, there'd be liability concerns and insurance concerns. But I mentioned Jack's Solar Farm earlier. Jack's has a community supported agriculture, project there. There's always people there. What they do is there's a protocol that people have to abide by when they go on the farm. And, because those solar arrays are producing electricity. So you got to respect them. It's no different than, I grew up on a dairy farm, and if the PTO shaft doesn't have a cover on it, and my pants get caught in the PTO shaft as it's going around, I'm going to get hurt. So it's the same concept here, that you respect the solar arrays. You can still conduct your business, you still grow crops, but you just have to respect it.
Other questions or comments? Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, one more. Charles, I see, I see with the price of row crops, at least, there seems to be there seems to be a surplus of farmland available. We're also seeing that much of the corn grown in the United States, somewhere between 30 and 40%, goes into ethanol production. And at least until last week, the country seemed to be moving towards more and more electric vehicles over the shorter, longer term, so that we won't be burning ethanol in our cars like we are currently. So the demand, at least for maybe some substantial percent of the corn, is going to diminish. And I also heard people talk about, in Michigan at least, we need about 2% of the ag land for solar. So is there really I mean, I really like the idea of agrivoltaic. I think it's a nice compliment. But if there's impediments and we really don't need the farmland, we can really use it for solar. Is there really an argument that we really need to do this? And maybe we need to do it, as you started off your presentation with, to convince locals that this is a good thing to do.
Yeah. Growing corn, I suspect that the corn is probably going to be the last crop that actually goes in, because it's too high.
Right.
So I think there will be, some zoning ordinances dictate that there's a buffer between the actual arrays and the outside fence. And that's probably where, corn, if it's going to be grown on a solar project, is probably going to be grow in. But I don't see it being grown in between the arrays. I don't know if that quite answered your question or not. I think what's going to happen with ethanol, I think that some of that's going to be used for like rocket fuel or other types of, they're going to figure out ways to take those molecules and do something else that's value added, whatever that is.
Okay.
Hey, Charles, you and I earlier were talking about how long people have been doing this, and you kind of mentioned there's farmers who've been doing this in Michigan even for 4 or 5 years. But I'm wondering, we're still kind of in a new stage of this for a lot of folks, and I'm assuming the university, like MSU, are involved in kind of doing some research to kind of see what works best and how productive these approaches are. Am I making a good assumption?
So yes, on many fronts. The thing that's missing is we don't have a solar project on the ground that we can answer some of those agrivoltaic questions. And it's not for the lack of trying. It's just that we haven't had the right partner come along. The first company that wanted to have a solar project didn't want us to conduct research on their premise. You know, they're one of those companies that don't like people coming onto their property, and that kind of soured the university. But my understanding is now that there's some discussions with a new solar developer who will allow the university to conduct research on their site. So, and I'm not privy to who that is. I just understand that those discussions are going.
Okay, well, that sounds promising. Lee, go ahead.
Yeah, keep pushing for that, Charles. The MSU needs to be a partner on this, not someone who
Bystander.
objects. I have some contacts at Ohio State, and they have a 6,000 acre array being built near their normal research farm. And I think that the Ohio State has asked for some slight changes in about 1,700 acres of that. And this year they're going to engage in 70 of those acres with active crop growing, with the idea that they're going to grow, they're going to learn more and they're going to start occupying some more of that. But that's a little bit of a point that if you have 6,000 acres available, you can't switch your industry to grab 6,000 acres, under these circumstances. You have to take some baby steps. And so they're on that route, and I compliment them for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, one of the notes I made when you were making your presentation is that electric tractor, what was it doing? It was tethering the hay.
It was tethering the hay,
I
right?
thought you might want to mention that there's not that many haymakers on this call tonight.
Right. I mentioned it was a tedder, but I
Yeah,
go into deep.
and of course that's to turn the hay so it'll dry better.
Right.
And of course someone's going to raise their eyebrows on that and say, really? Now my panels are all going to be covered with dust? Okay. And so those are the kinds of things that what looks in your slide as electric tractor, all of a sudden in the minds of certain other people, it raises other questions. And I think that's one of the reasons that people aren't putting solar panels along roads, is because
Right.
they got dirt on them more. And so that's just an illustration of how one picture raises one question in one person's mind, right? And a completely different question in someone else's mind.
Yeah. Thanks, Lee.
The other thing that I haven't heard you talk about, and I haven't heard anyone else talk about, is if you do tillage, and many of your vegetable illustrations showed the tillage, no one's talking about erosion at the drip line. And I think that there's a lot of sites where you have a drip line and it's bare soil, and it's a real issue.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that the farms that I've been on that have been growing vegetables, I didn't see a drip line. So
Go
They
ahead,
probably
Jay.
cultivated since it rained.
oh,
So
Jay,
anyhow,
Jay, go ahead with your question.
Well, I'll just follow up on the drip line. There are always ways of taking that drip line and breaking it up with rain chains and even lengths of rope and things like that. But anyway, we seem to be hounding, in particular in the chat channel here, about we shouldn't allow this to happen. We should only grow crops and so forth. And I have to go and point out that we is the owner of the property, and that is the farmer. And it's the farmer's property to do with whatever he likes with his land. And perhaps the guy is getting old and he doesn't want to be out there in the sun and the dirt and lifting things. And perhaps his family is no longer interested in farming and they've gone on to other industries, so he has no one to pass the farm on to. And this old guy is looking for a way to retire comfortably, and here is a way he can do that and guarantee an income from his property, whether he does agrivoltaics for a while he can, or he finds somebody else to do that for him. But it's a great way to go and give him a way to enter into retirement comfortably. And we don't have any say in what the farmer does with his property. We don't seem to have a big problem with taking farms and digging out basements and building subdivisions, because we all go off and we increase the population of the planet by having kids and building up all kinds of subdivisions, which of course consume more power, require more resources, water, power, etc., and of course wipe out farmland. Where do you think the subdivisions came from? They were almost always a farm, and we lived through that, and we didn't run out of food. But I'll also add to this in the respect of farmers having a way to have a steady income. It's very, very risky to be a farmer. You have a bad year where there's too much water. You have a bad year where there's not enough water and your crops don't come in, or the yield is bad, and you have risked an entire year of your life into and work into this, and it might not pay off. And this is why a lot of farmers are just loving things like wind turbines, where they give up an acre or two, and in exchange they've got enough money to make it through the year, even if the crops fail. So I don't hold this against the farmers at all if they choose to do what they want on their property. So I'm off my soapbox.
Well, Jay, let me just add one little comment here. I have a proposed 1,200 acre solar project in my county. I'm in Ottawa County, and I did talk with some of the farmers who are involved in that project, and some of them are, as you described, looking at retiring, and they were okay with someone else coming. They didn't want to crop the land, but they were fine with someone else coming in and growing crops there. So they looked at it as that's the continuation of what I've been doing with my land for 60 years or 50 years, whatever.
Jeff, did you have a question or a comment you wanted to make? You lowered your
Yeah, I
hand.
think you answered my question, but I'm new to this topic, and I was just wondering whether the focus of this agrivoltaics is large scale for electricity production for the grid. And it sounded like just a comment that Charles just made was 1,200 acres. So I'm assuming that what we're discussing here is large scale. Not to say that someone can't put in, solar panels on their farm for for their own usage. So is that what's going on here? I mean, in the hinterland here.
Actually, Jeff, I'm glad you brought that point out, because in reality, the best fit for agrivoltaics is your community solar projects. And think about it in this perspective. The rule of thumb for sheep is 3 ewes per acre or 9 lambs per acre. We have 87,000 head of sheep in Michigan. All of the flocks, all of the farms, sheep farms in Michigan, except for one, are family farms. They're small flocks. And so if you've got a 20-acre community solar site, that's 60 sheep. That is right in the wheelhouse of our local sheep producers. It's perfect. It's perfect. They don't have to go out and buy sheep. They typically have flocks that are that big, or they can grow to be that big. And same way with community, community growing vegetables in a community solar projects. That's about the right scale. I think what's going to happen with large solar projects is when you get 1,000 to 2,000 to 3,000 acres, we have so many different soil types in Michigan that we're going to look at those projects and we're going to say, this piece over here is really good for pollinator habitat. That's what we're going to do with that. This piece, because it's got great soil, we're going to raise crops. This is kind of marginal land over here. That's great for, excuse me, that's great for planting forages. So it's going to go into grass and we're going to graze it. And so I think what's going to happen is they're going to, look at the different soil types and make the agricultural connection that way on these large solar projects.
So when you say community projects, are you referring to microgrids? Shared
No.
microgrids? No? Okay.
No. So there's legislation. John, can you talk a little bit about that? And I want to get to Jen's question here, but what's the update on community solar legislation?
I'll let John Freeman answer that. Go ahead, John.
Well, I mean, we've been trying for 6 years to get it enacted, and we have not been successful because DTE and consumers have strongly opposed it. The new legislature just started about 2 weeks ago. So the bills in the House and the Senate will have to be reintroduced, and we'll have to start the process over again. But I am developing a strategy a little bit different than what we've been doing the last 6 years. I think we need to go big on this issue. I think we need to tap into a lot more constituencies around the state for building political support for community solar. And I think we need to be organizing within legislator districts to get the legislators' own constituents putting pressure on the legislator to support community solar. We really haven't done that in the last few years. And I think, the old expression, if, the definition of insanity is to expect a different outcome, but you keep doing the same thing, and that's not going to happen. So we need to broaden the base of support for this. And so we're going to be working on this for this year and next year, probably.
It's a priority of GLREA to push ahead the community solar legislation. Jens, go ahead. Finally got to you.
No worries. Good evening. Nice, I love the pictures and all that. So we talked about the animals or the crops and a little bit about the panels and technology. They need to come up maybe a little bit more robust wire management. Myself, I'm thinking I've run down fence posts, gutters, all sorts of things driving around on a tractor. Is there like more damage to the things from just operating a farm? I mean, it seems quite risky to have this expensive equipment out there and people going around. And then on the other side, though, we get fancy lane keep assist or GPS guided tractors that go straight for like 5 miles without a blip in the row. Is that intersection kind of being utilized, like somehow the equipment side of it, like the tractors and the implements?
Yep. So one of the things that I do is I work with commercial manure applicators. I've been working in the manure arena for 30 years. And these guys have GPS systems on their tractors. All they got to do is just plug the numbers in, plug the data in, and they're good to go. So they're watching where the manure goes. They're not having to worry about where the tractor goes. And that's eventually where I see this is going to go. I think Clyde can tell you, Clyde Taylor, they're building a big solar project behind his farm. They use laser precision survey instrument to put make sure the rows are straight, and that's pretty typical for all of these. So I can see farm equipment with GPS in it, put the coordinates in, and boom chakalaka, you're going down through there, and you're not clipping the corners on these modules. You got a follow-up, Jens?
No, it's good. I'm a mechanical
Okay.
engineer, so any kind of gadgetry that can go on an implement, maybe some collision warning or,
Yeah.
but yeah, just
Well, to
being on
begin
a-
with, you probably wouldn't want to put a 19-year-old on a tractor
Probably
driving
not.
through this. Someone a little bit more mature.
Indeed.
got
All
a-
right. Have a good afternoon then. Bye.
Yeah, we got a few minutes left, so we have time for maybe one more comment or question. Anybody want to take the last question or comment? Okay.
Yeah, no, I have a comment.
Go
In
ahead.
a recent job that I had, I was driving all over out in the country in small towns, industrial, to call on industrial facilities. I saw so much signage about no industrial solar farms in rural areas across the Midwest. And so I'm just wondering if there's some movement or some kind of effort to distinguish these industrial solar farms, which there's a lot of pushback, it seems, in relation, and as opposed to agrivoltaics, which I think would maybe be more amenable to a lot of people if they knew that they were retaining the agricultural portion of this kind of installation. But just a comment of what I've seen out there in the hinterland, so to speak.
So Jeff, that's why there's got to be a paradigm shift. That's been my little red wagon here. We need to lead with agriculture. If we're gonna, if we're really gonna put solar in Michigan, I guess first of all we're gonna look at where can we put it on the rooftops? Where can we go with the brownfields? Where can we go, with the airports? Where is the marginal land that we can put solar in? And we kind of look at those first. The reason that solar developers don't necessarily look there first is because ag land typically is flat and they don't have to do anything. They can just come in and put a solar project in. But if we're looking at other available sites and then we have to go into ag land, then let's look at our marginal land first. And that way, and if we're going to go on ag land, then let's lead with agriculture. Now that may not
Yeah,
change.
thanks. No, you made that comment, and it's well taken. Yep, I like that. Thank you.
And I just want to add a couple of points. I think change is difficult for people, and people have a vision of a rural lifestyle. And then all of a sudden, as we start to transition from fossil fuels to solar, that's not easy for people. But there is a fair amount of this opposition occurring in rural townships that's being supplied and funded by oil and gas interests who do not want to see solar and wind be the future or the predominant source of generation of electricity. In Michigan, there's a gentleman named Kevin Martis who works for a national outfit that's funded by the Koch brothers to whip up local opposition. And the way they do that is providing a lot of false information. And so just like Charles said, that there's no inherent, conflict between solar and agricultural usage. And, so we can do both, but it does require, as Charles said, a paradigm shift or more in normal language, just pure education. And the other thing to realize too is that, these solar developers, they pay farmers, as someone indicated earlier, I forget who, they pay farmers rent money. So it helps the farmer's economics to keep the farm within the family. But the developer also pays a fair amount of property taxes in local rural communities, which helps support the local schools and helps support the government in the rural cities to provide police and fire services. And another way of looking at it is that by the solar developer paying taxes means there's less pressure on the farmers to have their taxes go up. So there are a number, and of course, we haven't even talked about the jobs that are created in the implementation of the solar thing. And then there's always some jobs that are there once the system is built. So in other words, solar can be a real economic development tool for the rural communities if it's done properly. And one of the things that GLREA strongly believes in is trying to promote negotiations and discussions between developers and local units of government to try and find common ground that we can have the best of what solar offers, but maintain the integrity of the rural communities, and of course, maintain the integrity of the land that the solar is on. And I'll stop there.
Thanks, John.
So,
Well, it's after 8 o'clock. So thank you, Charles, for a great presentation. And thanks to everybody who attended for a great discussion. And Phil, I hope you can join us again on another Thursday evening Zoom. We pretty much have
Absolutely.
them every Thursday.
so
Charles, did you want to say
John,
something?
yeah, just I noticed that there are some questions in the chat here that for if you didn't get your question answered or you want to talk with me further about this, just Google my name, it'll pop up, and give me a call. I'd love to talk with all of you, any of you that want to talk about this further or still have questions. So
Hey, thank you, Charles, for offering that. And again, thanks for your presentation, and thanks to everybody for attending. Hope to see you again in future weeks. Take care, everybody. Stay warm.
see ya.